Good afternoon and welcome to this edition of Border Report Live. My name is Rudy Mireles and I'm your host here in Harlingen, Texas, in the Rio Grande Valley of deep South Texas. We have got an incredible program lined up for you today. Our El Paso correspondent, Julian Resendez, is going to be joining us to lead a conversation with the Director of Defense Oversight for the Washington Office for Latin America, Mr. Adam Isacson. Really looking forward to this conversation coming in just a few moments. But as always, let's start by taking a look at what's making news across the border, starting with some pretty horrific news out of Mexico today, where two Chihuahua State police officers plunged to their deaths when they came under attack Tuesday morning in the town of Moris. Now, investigators say the officers were at the end of their shifts when they encountered what were only described as armed civilians. During the clash, two officers died when their police unit went off the road and into a ravine. A third officer was shot and killed, state police say. 4 officers were injured, though the extent of their injuries is still unknown. In recent years, groups associated with the Sinaloa cartel and La Línea, or the Old Juarez cartel, have been warring in that region. Now, according to a news release from the Chihuahua State Police, officials have called for a special operation in that area with support from the agency's SWAT team and special forces, as well as the Mexican military and National Guard. Also happening, Mexican authorities say they arrested a Tren de Aragua leader who ran sex trafficking and kidnapping rings in 3 states, distributed drugs, and is a suspect in several femicides. Nelson Arturo Alcantara, a.k.a. Nelson, and 2 alleged accomplices are charged with possession of drugs. The men carried small bags of crystal methamphetamine, meth rocks, and marijuana. He had arrest warrants on charges of organized criminal activities, including human and drug trafficking. The 3 men are said to be Tren de Aragua members with operations in the states of Morelos, Puebla, Mexico State, and in Mexico City. Tren de Aragua is a Venezuelan prison gang that has grown tremendously in recent years. And moving on to our next story, this one out of Chicago, where ICE agents shot a Presbyterian minister in the head with a pepper ball while he was standing with protesters in front of the ICE detention center in Broadview, Illinois in September. Now, the video, which went viral this week, shows protesters, including Pastor David Black, standing and shouting in front of the detention center while 3 ICE agents can be standing on the roof. They're right there on your screen, and you can see them right at the top of the corner of that brick building there as that gentleman in black. That's actually Pastor Black right there with another person going in front of him to try to block him. Boom, right there. You can see that pepper ball exploding on top of the pastor's head there. Now, going back to the story, Black told Religion News Service that he was inviting the ICE agents to repent when that video was recorded. After he was hit by that pepper ball, Black said he could hear the ICE agents laughing at him. Black was okay and was helped by people at the scene. A Homeland Security spokeswoman defended the ICE officer who fired that shot, saying what this clipped video doesn't show is that these agitators were blocking an ICE vehicle from leaving the federal facility, impeding operations. Time now to bring in our El Paso correspondent, Julian Resendez, and our guest for today's program, Mr. Adam Isacson, who is the Director of Defense Oversight for the Washington Office for Latin America. Thank you for joining us today, sir.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me. I'm a longtime viewer and reader.
Thank you. Julian?
Yes, Rudy. Before we go on to the interview, I do have an update on that Chihuahua crime story. We know that as far as today, there have been 9 arrests in connection with the killing of those 3 Chihuahua State Police officers. Those arrested allegedly are members of the criminal group or the cartel called La Línea, which is the Old Juarez cartel. And we learned more details about the ambush today. The State Public Safety Director called it an ambush. He said that people hiding in those hills that you see in the background in the video fired at a caravan of police officers going to relieve some associates near the town of Moris, Chihuahua, which is right next to the border with Sinaloa. And like you mentioned, the border between Chihuahua and Sinaloa, both of them northern Mexican states bordering the United States, are a battleground right now between groups associated with La Línea and what's left of the Sinaloa cartel. So while these officers were on patrol, they came under fire. And there was a total of 7 state police officers who were injured. You mentioned their condition. I can tell you that two of them remain hospitalized, apparently with gunshot wounds. The others, the other five, have been released from medical care, and they were victims apparently of crashes or vehicle overturns when they came under fire. So that's the latest we have on that incident, really. Now, as far as today's interview, I can tell you that we are longtime followers of the Washington office for Latin America. A lot of insightful information, a lot of perspective and analysis, especially regarding topics of interest, including immigration, politics in specific Latin American countries that sooner or later impact us here in the U.S., either through migration, through trade, or sometimes, as is the case of Trinidad and Venezuela, through public safety. Now, the reason we invited Isacson today is because the Washington Office of Latin America recently came up with an analysis, an article regarding the first year in office of Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum. Uh, can you tell us about that, sir?
Sure. I mean, we were looking at what has worked and what has not in Sheinbaum's first year. There have been some departures from her predecessor, Andrés Manuel López Obrador. For one thing, the approach to organized crime seems to have gotten a bit smarter. There has been a decrease in many measures of violence, particularly organized crime tied violence, which is positive. There's been a pretty sharp decline in trafficking of fentanyl, and seizures of fentanyl are significantly down, almost by half at the border this year. There are concerns, though, and some of it carrying over from what her predecessor had been doing. It is quite concerning that Mexicans are now electing all of their judges. Their judicial branch is now becoming rather politicized, and Scheinbaum's political party is very dominant. Mexico is almost losing its status as a multi-party state, and she continues policies that are giving Mexico's armed forces a giant role in internal security. And of course, an army is really meant to defeat an enemy with overwhelming force, not to protect and serve a population with minimal violence. So that was how I would sum it up. But yeah, I mean, she is coming out of her first year as a very popular leader.
Yeah, that was what I was going to say next. We were seeing images just a few seconds ago of a celebration that took place a few days ago at the Mexico City Principal Square, which is called El Zócalo. And it was reported that tens of thousands of people came pretty much to celebrate their first woman president. And we have to stress, to emphasize that Ms. Claudia Sheinbaum is Mexico's first female president.
That's right.
It was almost meant to be because the two leading candidates in the presidential election were both women. One for the conservative coalition led by the National Action Party, uh, uh, and one led by the Morena coalition, which for which the previous president Andrés Manuel López Obrador was also a leader and a party member. Mr. Isaacson, what can you tell us about the popularity of Ms. Sheinbaum? She appears to be still have a great echo among the population. Why is that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, her predecessor, AMLO, was also very popular. He consistently polled in the high 60s approval rating, and that's about where she is. She may even be slightly higher than where AMLO was, but their styles are quite different. Lopez Obrador was quite populist. He was an orator. He would give long, stem-binding speeches, and he had a real popular touch. Scheinbaum is more reserved. She is as a communicator. She's not off-putting, but she comes across as much quieter. Her background is as a scientist. She's an expert in the environment, and it comes across as more technocratic. But she has also just been really deft in getting messages out, uh, not through the daily social media messaging, but her her daily press conferences go quite well. Her public appearances are very well orchestrated. She gets all kinds of good grades for her handling of the Trump administration. Not frontally clashing with them, but being firm when she needs to, and that has really helped. But it's helped her too that yes, public security is not worsening anymore in Mexico. The economy is not growing fast, but it's not cratering. And a lot of the cash transfer programs that her predecessor was running that really lifted a lot of people out of poverty are continuing under her. So, those stars are aligned. I mean, I would worry about the economy in the next couple of years, but hey, we're worried about that here in the United States as well.
Right. Yeah, I was going to ask you next about the social programs that AMLO started and that Ms. Sheinbaum has really taken over as far as expanding. I understand that people, the elderly, the disabled, and other groups are receiving pretty much debit cards with cash.
That's right. They're called conditional trash cash transfer programs for the most part. You have to usually uh, be participating in the system in some way, taking your kids to school or voting or participating in your community in order to receive those. But yeah, I mean, people are getting payments from the national treasury, from the taxes of wealthier Mexicans, and it's not like a massive redistribution program. It's not lifting people necessarily from poverty to the middle class, but it is lifting them from extreme poverty, from going to bed hungry to actually having enough food, and meeting basic conditions. And wherever those conditional cash transfer programs have been tried in Latin America, they've made presidents quite popular, and they have made people feel much better off. And it's really important. They've often, and it helps keep kids in school, but they've often been hard to sustain. As soon as the economy like even turns down a bit, it often they end up getting cut back.
We're speaking with Mr. Adam Isacson, Director of Defense Oversight for the Washington Office for Latin America. We're going to continue the conversation after a real quick break, so make sure to stay with us. Border Report Live is back in 1 minute. And welcome back to Border Report Live. Joining us today, El Paso correspondent Julian Resendez and Mr. Adam Isacson, Director of Defense Oversight for the Washington Office for Latin America.
Thank you, Rudy. Mr. Isacson, now I'd like to talk about in depth about two of the topics that we kind of talked about already. One would be the relationship between Ms. Sheinbaum and President Trump, and the other one later would be about crime, and we'll go in depth into those. So,
Great.
yeah, I was speaking to another expert when Ms. Sheinbaum got elected, and he told me, "Well, congratulations, Claudia, you won the raffle. You get to take home a tiger, a ferocious tiger." How would you characterize the first year in office of Ms. Sheinbaum in relation to her relationship and the pressures that she has fielded from the President Trump?
Yeah, I mean, her relationship with President Trump, you could describe it maybe as a delicate dance. You could almost describe it as martial arts. I mean, she's been very deft at parrying all of the thrusts that have come from from President Trump, from tariff threats to frequent musings about carrying out attacks on cartel targets on Mexican soil, to mass deportations and what that could do to Mexico's economy with such an abrupt change and the way that Mexican citizens are being treated in the United States. She has never raised her voice and yelled at Trump and really tried to provoke him or anything like that, but she has stood firm and said, no, Mexico will not be treated this way. These are things that we can happy to negotiate, but we're not going to simply yield. And that has worked to her advantage politically. I think we've seen this happen with other leaders in the region, like the Prime Minister of Canada or Lula in Brazil. They have simply by standing firm, without being overly aggressive, by standing firm in the face of these criticisms or these demands from Trump, they've made their poll numbers go up significantly.
All right. And when it comes to public safety, I know that Ms. Sheinbaum has recently shown some statistics saying, well, crime is down, murders are down, but that's kind of like cherry picking some statistics because I
Yeah.
understand that there's still 25 to 29,000 homicides a year. And there we see a graphic in which he kind of compares previous presidencies. And at the very end, we see in red the results from the Lopez Obrador, her predecessor, her colleague, her mentor's work, and they seem to be the highest in Mexican history. What can you tell us? What's your analysis of the public safety situation? Has it improved, and how much of it has improved because of U.S. pressure to go after what Mexico calls the violence, the generators of violence, which is the drug traffickers?
Um, it definitely there is this double-digit improvement in homicides. We're not as clear about what's going on with disappearances. Certainly not as clear about quality of life crimes like extortion, which is something that affects more Mexicans every day. Those may not have gone down as much, but yeah, some of it is a tougher line on the cartels. Some of it is the breakdown within the Sinaloa cartel, which has kept them from being as much of a factor in other parts of the country. There appear to be pacts, a lot of things we don't see, but arrangements happening between remnants of the Sinaloa cartel and the Jalisco cartel, which is a very violent organization, but is rising in power. But there seem to be pacts in places like Chiapas and elsewhere where they are, some of the factions are just succumbing to the Jalisco cartel. So rather than a frontal assault on organized crime, a lot of it might be that there are new monopolies, new arrangements coalescing within the world of organized crime that is keeping some parts of Mexico that were very hot from being as hot. They're cooling down a bit just because of just things that we don't always perceive within the criminal underworld in Mexico. The big story right now, I think, is the rise of the Jalisco New Generation cartel, which, if I'm not wrong, but maybe even has some relations now with La Linea there in the El Paso and Ciudad Juarez area. And the rise of that cartel in some places, if they're uncontested, could make those areas peaceful. In other places, though, where they're horning in on another group's territory, you may see increases in crime and violence in the next couple of years.
And now, as far as President Trump, he keeps him and his administration keep talking about organized crime and the cartels and the threat of fentanyl. Do you think there will be continued pressure on Mexico to continue delivering drug cartel leaders, to continue making a lot of seizures, to stem the flow of chemicals into Mexico, which are used to produce fentanyl and methamphetamine?
Absolutely. There's going to be constant pressure on Mexico. President Trump has been using the drug war and the recategorization of organized crime groups as terrorist groups all over the region. It's not just Mexico. It's happening in Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador. There's groups being added to the terrorist list who actually are not quite political. They're really more like criminal businesses, but they're being added to the list. And yeah, Mexico is going to be caught up in that. One thing working to President Scheinbaum's advantage is, yeah, I mean, if by the end of the year, if things stay at this, or by the end of the fiscal year, or we don't have the September data yet, at the rate things are going, fentanyl seizures at the U.S. border are going to drop about 45% from the year before, which is something that President Scheinbaum can point to and to alleviate some of the pressure. Cocaine, however, is apparently increasing. There's probably more supplies coming from South America, and maybe next year that may be something we'll see more pressure from the Trump administration about. My question, though, and this could happen at any moment, is, if at some point the Trump administration sees there's a lab or a cartel figure somewhere that they have detected and they want to go send a drone strike or a special forces team to go take them out, and of course Mexico hasn't given consent for U.S. troops on their territory, which is hugely sensitive. What happens then? What happens if there is such an incident? And what other kinds of cooperation will fall apart if there really is an incident like that?
All right. One more question about Ms. Sheinbaum. You already kind of told me about her character, but just 1 year into office, what's your take on her as an individual, as a leader, as a politician? What can you tell us about the president of Mexico?
I think we've been surprised at how adroit a politician she is. We expected her, as mayor of Mexico City, for instance, her profile was reasonably high, but she avoided headlines. She avoided saying things that made a lot of big splashes. And as a president who has to communicate to a country of 130 million people on the world stage, would that translate, especially after the bombast of her predecessor, AMLO? So far, that style has worked very well for her. It also helps, let's face it, that she has just about a supermajority in both houses of Mexico's Congress, a lot of governors on her side. When I talk to experts in Mexico, there is some disagreement on how independent she is from her predecessor, López Obrador, but that independence is bound to keep increasing probably as López Obrador ages and she puts more of her own people in. Her people in the cabinet, and they don't all seem to be her people, but her people in the cabinet do seem to be the more capable, less populist managers, if not leaders, at least managers. And maybe that's the way I would sum this up. So far, she has proved to be something of a leader, whereas we had expected simply more of a manager.
Got it. Got it. I have two more questions for you, sir.
Right?
Speaking of popularity, I know that Walla has expressed some concern about the Morena party pretty much dominating Mexican politics overall. In that relationship with the newly enacted constitutional changes to allow for the election of judges, there's a
Right.
concern that most of the judges are going to be right in line with the interest of the ruling party. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I mean, the one concern is simply you need an independent judicial branch, and you need judges to actually be chosen according to their independence and their qualifications. And when judges run for office because they have the blessing of, in many cases, of Scheinbaum's party, people are voting. The voting turnout was terrible, but the people who did turn out to vote were largely turned out to vote by the ruling Morena party, and most of the judges were tied to Morena. And some of them are really under an ethical cloud too. Some of them had been defense lawyers for narco traffickers and things like that, and now they're in charge of their own courtrooms. So that's going to be problematic. A larger, bigger issue is Mexico had a 70-year experience with one party rule. Even as they had elections every 6 years, there was one party, the Institutional Revolutionary Party, or PRI, that dominated, that always won the presidency and had, even in alliances with other parties, always had just a mega supermajority in the Congress. And it was very hard to challenge that party and there was some repression, some bad repression sometimes, but also just a lot of patronage and buying people out. And there was not full freedom of speech. And you really couldn't do business without doing business with the party. And there's a concern that if Morena remains dominant in that very populist way, using the military when it has to, et cetera, that you may be seeing the formation of a new dynasty and basically Mexico's experiment with multi-party democracy lasting only 18 years. We will see, but that concern is very much on the horizon for us at WOLA.
Right. Specifically, I was thinking how would it affect me as an American, let's say, doing business in Mexico, to suddenly have a disagreement with the Mexican federal government, taking them to court over a business matter, and then
Thank
facing
goodness,
a
yeah.
judge who came up the ranks of the party.
That's an excellent point. I mean, when we think about courts, we often think about, making sure there's no impunity for criminals. We think about punishing, I don't know, corrupt officials who are in league with organized crime. But what about the sanctity of your contracts when you're a business person and your investments? What about the sanctity of your property rights? If that is dependent on you being in good stead or in good standing with the ruling party, then that's not the rule of law. You've evolved into something else. And that's a real danger for future investment and doing business in Mexico.
We've been.
Any final thoughts about what's
Oh,
coming in the second year?
Really have my eye on Mexico's economy. I mean, if the United States is also, our economy seems to be softening. Imagine your number one trade partner is softening, adding tariffs, deporting perhaps hundreds of thousands of people who are unemployed and adding to your reserve of unemployed. Remittances go down. It's hard to imagine really right now a perspective where Mexico's economy is going to grow and even stay out of recession over the next year. And that's going to be probably Scheinbaum's biggest challenge.
we're speaking with Mr. Adam Isacson, Director of Defense Oversight for the Washington Office for Latin America. We appreciate your time, sir, but unfortunately we are out of time. We hope we can call on you again in the future because this has been an
Please.
incredibly informative edition for our viewers. So thank you again for joining us.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Stay with us. We are going to be right back after a quick break. And welcome back to this edition of Border Report Live. My name is Rudy Mideles, and I am your host here in Harlingen, Texas, in the Rio Grande Valley of Deep South Texas. I wanted to thank again Mr. Adam Isacson, Director for Defense Oversight at the Washington Office for Latin America. If you missed today's interview, you can always get more in podcast edition. We're now available, Border Report Live, that is, on Apple Podcasts, the iHeartRadio app, Spotify, and YouTube as well. So if you're just looking to catch up on your commute, maybe you're taking the dog out for a walk, maybe you're pumping some iron, no better way than to stay up to date with everything that's happening on both sides of the border, especially had incredible guests all week, and tomorrow the incredible guest role, I guess you could call it, is going to continue as our Salvador Rivera, our San Diego correspondent, and joins us with guest Mr. Rob Bonta, the Attorney General for the state of California. Going to be a very informative session there. You won't want to miss it. For Julian Resendez, our El Paso correspondent, again, I'm Rudy Mireles. Thank you so much for watching.